Kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another edition of a Big Hairy News BHN. G'day, Chewy.
Hello, how's things?
Oh, guys, things are going quite well, actually. I got a message on Twitter today from someone. Sorry, I don't mean someone like I don't know who it is. It's just that my dyslexic brain doesn't allow me to remember names very well. Talking about us getting mentions around places like.
Please be the good parts of the internet.
No.
Not the toilet parts.
No. Odyssey.com. Say no more. About our apparent celebration of the guys from Counterspin Media being arrested, and they were quite concerned. The Billy Takaha was on the live stream as well. Someone sent me the link, so that's the group where we're dealing about. Quite concerned that apparently on this show, Big Hairy News or something, people were apparently celebrating the arrest.
Why would that be concerning? Should they not be concerned about Counterspin being a bunch of demons?
And then they were like, it's always funny when people use this as an insult. Oh, these bunch of leftists. Like that negates any kind of argument, like these bunch of leftists. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, someone sent me the link. Who sent me the link? Hitanga Digital sent me the link, and yeah, I had a look at it, and I watched a bit of it, and then I watched about the following 10 minutes of it because I was like, what else is this about? It's always interesting to see what's going on out there. And God, 10 minutes, I could never get my life back. It's like you watch something like that and you think, oh, I'd rather chew broken glass whilst crawling over, I don't know, razor blades rather than that 10 minutes that's lost from my life. Anywho, as we move on. So yeah, what about you, brother? What's been going on the last 24 hours?
Oh, I arrived to work to a kicked in window. I don't know if anybody in Dunedin has seen the story. Someone got drunk and decided throwing bricks through windows was a fun thing to do. So me and my colleagues trawled the video camera footage to see when it happened. And we saw a very drunk man trying to be MMA. Like it looked like he was going to punch it. And then at the last minute, he decided to kick it really badly. So that's fun. We've had comments about that all day. He went on to smash about 4 or 5 other shop windows last night.
So kick the window in.
Yeah. It's a laminated window, so he cracked it, but didn't get in.
And I was wondering if someone kicks in a window or smashes a window, and then there's stock in the shop, the next person comes along and helps himself, but just cracked it and damaged it, but didn't fall in.
Yeah, so it'd be one of those plastic laminate windows, but certainly farmers had their enormous plate glass window completely smashed. He chucked a paving stone through it. And then from reading on the story, one of the rough sleepers in town told him to pull his head in and got smacked in the face, ended up in hospital. So, not good.
Yeah.
But that's been the talk of town.
Do you ever find out? I remember when I used to work in, like as a student, I'd work in petrol stations. And when there was an emergency, like I can remember one time where we lost power. And so we had to eat all the ice creams because they were all going to go off.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
And sometimes
I would be ready for that. Like, the lights have been out for about a minute.
But don't you find that sometimes when you're at work, and I'm not saying this is a good thing for a workplace to have their windows kicked in, but when there's like something that's dramatically different, it kind of feels like a really different, interesting day at work. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I remember when I was up and working in Lower Hutt, we had a power cut, and I worked in an EB Games at the time, and so our tills are down, our FPOS is down, the store's black, you know. And I messaged my area manager and going, "Oh, look, we've had a power cut. I don't know how long it's going to be, so we're just going to chill in the cafe across the road or something. We're going to sit in the park until the power comes on." And he goes, no, do a stock take. And, and I was like, how? It's dark, man. So in the end, we compromised, and me and my assistant manager sat on chairs on the footpath, and people come up to the door and go, "Oh, I just want to have a look." And it's like, no, you can't have a look because it's black. You know, it's dark. And the lady from the bakery across the road came and gave us some ice creams.
Nice.
Because it was a hot day, and I remember this member of the public coming along going, "Oh, why aren't you doing anything? You should be working." And it was just like, look at this dark shop. What are we gonna do? Are we gonna clean? Lady, move on. Leave us to our ice creams.
I remember one of the best ones I remember was when I was working at ZB doing an overnight. So it was like 2 o'clock in the morning, and the radio awards had just been on. And I just put that up, dude. And the radio awards had just been on, and I was working that night, so I didn't go, because everyone goes. It's a big party. You don't have to be winning anything. And it was like 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was doing talkback, and all of a sudden the fire alarm goes off. And I'm like, oh crap! And that's always exciting when you're working in talkback, because it's not like working in radio where you can just let the next 7 songs play. It's talkback, so you do have to put on an emergency music track or a CD or whatever. Or if you actually, they have this thing that if you just stop talking and you turn it off, there's actually an emergency signal that starts getting sent out, which is music as well. So we left and we went out of the building, and what had happened is one of the guys from ZM had come back to the station after the radio awards. We're on the 4th floor, they're on the 2nd floor, and set off a fire extinguisher in the lift. And that had set off the fire alarm. And so, of course, coming down the stairs, there was all this kind of looked like smoke coming under the door from the 2nd floor, because it was all fire extinguishers still kind of hanging in the air and stuff. And that was interesting. That gave me about 60 minutes off work that night, standing out on the street with everybody else, just hanging out, and then having to go back upstairs and explain to everyone who was listening, who basically all left because they were there for talkback and they've been hearing emergency music for an hour, that some fuckwit, which I couldn't say on ZB, but I can say here, at ZM decided to let off a fire extinguisher in the lift, which is pretty hilarious.
Nice.
Yes. Okay. So tonight, if you've seen the thumbnail for tonight, you already know that there's a couple of, as long as you recognize everybody that's on there, there's a couple of images up there from American politics, because there's a couple of American things I want to talk about tonight. And also Leader Luxon's on there as well. We want to talk a bit about what Mr. Luxon came out with. 2 things to do with Mr. Luxon tonight, actually. He came out today and he said no means no to Mr. Tamaki. 10 days after he probably should have, but he said it, and that's a really good thing, and he's ruled him out of working with him post-election. I don't think that it's necessarily, it doesn't matter, because Tamaki's not going to be there, but it's a standard, it's a stake to put in the ground, yada yada yada. But within those conversations today, of course, what National is doing now is they're trying to pivot away from that. Just like Labour yesterday was trying to pivot away from the tax thing. So this is not necessarily critical of National. This is what they do. They have a bad headline, so they try and pivot away from it and point to the point at the government. Whereas yesterday the government had a bad headline, so they tried to pivot away and point to the opposition, which is what they actually did with Grant Robertson screaming about, they have to say no to Brian Tamaki. But within one of the press conferences the press opportunities, Mr. Luxon made a series of claims about New Zealand and, quote unquote, this government. So I know that we do sometimes do what I like to call, a conspiracy theorists are always wrong, mostly. This is not like a debunking thing. What I've done, I've only been working on it since about 9:15. So I've had a bit of a cursory look over the claims he made. And I've spent half an hour or so searching the internet to find out if he's right or not. because I think what we want to do with our politicians from all walks of life, from every part of the political spectrum, is when they make a claim, we want to test it. And so
absolutely.
he made, I'll count them out for you. He made claims about the economy, about inflation, about the healthcare system, about school attendance, about the housing crisis, about rising crime, all in the space of about 15 seconds. That was his "don't look at us, let's look at them" moment. And I thought, cool, let's look at those. Are you right? Are you wrong? Is it undecided? Is there a reason for it? So we're going to have a look at that tonight as well. So we're going to look at the decision to move away from Destiny Church. I like it how he goes, there's nothing that man and I agree on. Well, I'm like, you're both evangelical Christians. There might be some things you both agree on. And also the claims he made in that thing as well. And the other thing is, we want to talk about the American conversation is Sarah Palin. We'll do that first, in fact. And then later on, if you haven't seen the clapback from the White House earlier this week about Republicans' hypocrisy, I want to share that with you. If you have seen it, because there's that, what is it? Thisyou going around the internet. If you have seen that, but you don't know what's behind it, or more importantly, who's behind it, I want to tell you about that as well, because it's actually quite an interesting little story.
Awesome. No,
before we kick off, has there been anything of those chats we need to throw out there or want to throw out there, too, before I rip into the first story?
I don't know if this is praise or criticism of your thumbnail choices. Did you know that there's a giant thumb in the middle of your thumbnail?
A giant thumb in the middle of my thumbnail. Oh, I know what it is. I was just thinking of that. Have you seen the thumbnail? Do you know what it is?
Yes.
I understand what is being referenced. Let me just bring it up to show other people.
Now, of course, that is cyberbullying, and we don't encourage it.
No, I actually didn't quite understand what was meant to start off with disaster piece, but there you go. There you go. All right. Let us start with the Sarah Palin conversation, because I have to be honest, I was driving today. So this would have probably come in about 1 o'clock New Zealand time. I was driving today and my phone went bring, and I'm don't touch my phone while I'm driving, but I came up to the lights and I had a look at what it was, and it was a New York Times article, and the New York Times article was the headline for what is this story.
New tonight, Sarah Palin has failed at her most recent attempt at a political comeback. She lost the special election for a vacant House seat in Alaska. That seat is now flipping to a Democrat for the first time since 1972. Here to discuss, former U.S. Representative Abby Finkenauer.
Yeah, well, you think about that. I mean, think about a safe national seat. Let's say Epsom. I mean, I know it's ACT, but, it's a safe conservative seat. Imagine that, or I think, Central Auckland has Central Auckland been left for a long time? Certainly Mount Albert. Mount Albert under Helen Clark has been in that Labor left camp for a very, very long time. Imagine though either of those seats kind of flipping to the opposition. It's a pretty massive thing. So it's been in Republican hands for 50 years. The last time a Democrat had it was 1972.
You see it in political commentators Errol Lewis and S.E. Cupp. S.E., let me start with you. Sarah Palin.
Yeah,
huge name recognition. Yeah, we have heard of her. And but that was the play. She had the name recognition, didn't win.
Well, I think Errol and I were just talking about this, a fellow Daily News alum. I've had a Daily News column for 12 years, in part because the first column I wrote was about Sarah Palin, is what people thought her name was.
We were trying to figure out the pronunciation.
No one knew who she was.
Right.
And I liked her story. I thought it was really impressive. And I thought, as much as she might have hurt John McCain, she also helped John McCain. But we all know what happened after. She resigned to the governor. She went on to be Fox famous, and she wanted to sort of follow
Fox fame.
And I get that she looked at this landscape with the Marjorie Taylor Greenes and the Matt Gaetzes and the Lauren Boeberts and thought, great, finally a chance to be famous and not have to govern all that much. But I think Alaskans were really turned off and felt abandoned by her when she left the state and kind of, in search of more famous pastures. So I think that was the result.
There you go. Part one. Chewy, yours, sir, as Murray Deaker used to say.
I'm glad that they mentioned all of those other terrible people in the Republican Party in the same breath, because really, when you chase it back, Sarah Palin's kind of a bit of a starting point.
I saw a headline today that said Sarah Palin was Trump before Trump. And maybe she's looking at what's going on at the moment. One of the more embarrassing things for the Republicans and for Donald Trump is he endorsed her. And I pick the greatest people, I pick the best people, I have all the best people around me. And there are several of his endorsements that aren't getting through. So that maybe does go to show that maybe he isn't quite the powerhouse that he once was.
Oh, I can feel it. I can feel it. Just a little bit of hope. A little bit of hope.
Well, let's go on, because this conversation went on, and there was one more point being made, and I haven't written down in my notes what that point was, but I'm sure it's a salient and good one. This last 30 seconds.
I mean, let's also not sell
I
the
remember that.
Democratic now winner short here. I mean, Mary Peltola, first Native Alaskan ever to be elected. I think that says something. Also, a Democrat hasn't won in 50 years in that seat. I mean, that says something.
So
and I think it's going to be, again, just another indicator that Democrats have a heck of a lot more hope going into 2022 than we did a few months ago.
Now, let's talk about this, because they have a particularly interesting system. So Mary Peltola has won this, but she has to compete again against the same candidates in November. So we're now in September, October. So 2 full months she's going to be the representative, and then they have to do it all over again, which is kind of ridiculous. And
what
New
a
Zealand,
fuck around.
Yeah. In New Zealand, the by-election laws, and this is basically what this is because the incumbent died, but the by-election laws are, if you're within 6 months of an election, you don't find a new MP. So this is one of the conversations around people like Uffindel and Sharma, is that, should either of those people leave today in New Zealand, then there'll be a by-election. Let's say for some reason they left in March of next year and the election was going to be in July, then there wouldn't be one. So it seems very strange that it's only 2 months away and they're having to redo it. But as that you can bring up that one that you've highlighted, Brian, because it's exactly what I was going to talk about as well. Simon says, I think Alaska uses a new electoral system called a ranked choice voting system. And that's right. Actually, for people in Dunedin, it's what we do for our local body election here, as many do. You rank your candidates.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounded like STD.
Yeah, it is like getting an STD. You rank your candidates, except far more painful. You rank your candidates. And what happened in Alaska is there was 2 conservative candidates. One surname was something like Baggage, and one was Palin, and they hate each other so much so that actually Palin's ex-in-laws, right? So the people who were her family to her husband actually ran the fundraiser for Baggage, I think his name is. And so what happened was, because there was such animosity between the conservative candidates, what they think happened was those people who loved Sarah Palin probably put Peltola as number 2. And those people who loved Baggage probably put Peltola as number 2. So Peltola would have got all the Democrat votes, and she would have been listed number 2 by many of the Republican votes, because the supporters joined in with the animosity, and those who loved Sarah Palin wouldn't vote for Baggage, and those who love Baggage wouldn't vote for Sarah Palin. And that could be what got them over the line. Now, the downside of all of this is they have to do it again in 2 months' time, and I suspect you'll see Republicans take it back. I think that's probably reality.
I was going to say, this is a great big help flag, run up the flagpole to the Republican money. Please send money. Please send help. This is bad. So it'll be interesting to see how they contest that one.
Yeah, but it's, you know what, it's fascinating because it's this. I love it how the right often talks about, we don't like identity politics, we don't like the cult of personality, all these things, which is exactly what people like Sarah Palin are. I mean, if you want to be reminded, and I'm sure you all do, as to who Sarah Palin is and what she's about, let me just remind you of a couple of things that this fucking genius was talking about in the last decade.
I'll try to find you some and I'll bring them to you.
This could be a 3-hour video, I imagine.
They're our next door neighbors, and you can actually see Russia from land here in Alaska.
Well, explain.
Just remember, she was saying that to say why she had credentials for international policy, because Russia's over the water. That was the way she was saying that she has credentials if Putin started to raise his head, because they're over there. That's why they're my credentials. Is madness.
To me, why that enhances your foreign policy credentials.
Yeah.
Well, it certainly does, because our next door neighbors are foreign countries.
What newspapers and magazines
Did you get that? our next door neighbors are foreign countries, like every country in the world. Because there's no country in the world whose next door neighbors are the same country, because it would be the same country. So honestly, a Mensa member, she is not.
You regularly read before you were tapped for this to stay informed and to understand.
I've read most of them, again, with a great appreciation for the press, for the media.
What one specifically, I'm curious that you...
All of them, any of them. Are struggling under the weight of the wrong mortgage. I would hope at least that those protesters have the courage and the honor of thanking our veterans for giving
The protesters that were chanting her name lovingly, those protesters.
them the right to protest. Okay, I'm doing that.
Good, great. We've got to start raising the spending. We have got to jumpstart these energy projects.
That was the
We've gotta start
greatest.
raising the
She reads off her hand.
We've got to.
Oh, look, I'm
that's
not going to
frequently-
criticize her for that as a comedian.
No, that's frequently
Good
known
note.
as the Alaskan Palm Pilot.
Jumpstart these energy projects. We've got to start reining in the spending. We have got to.
So-
I've been hearing about his Senate speeches since I was in like second
And the
grade.
people who are listening, the last comment is talking about she makes fun of Joe Biden's age, and then she was reminded that her running mate was 72. And yeah, look, so Gaff City, USA, and also, as you would expect, pretty soon after the win was announced, unsubstantiated claims of election fraud have been brought up on Donald Trump's social media
Oh.
platform. Soon after,
Okay.
Alaska Governor Sarah Palin lost in the state's special election to Democrat Mary Pelota. Ms. Pelota on Wednesday edged out Ms. Palin in a historic win to become the first Democrat to represent Alaska in Congress in 50 years. The other thing about Ms. Pelota is they're referencing her as a native Alaskan. Now, I'm assuming that means indigenous, of the indigenous people, because, you know, just purely the language wise, someone could say they were native Alaskan, meaning they were born and bred there. But I'm assuming that's the common parlance for indigenous people, which is the first ever, the first ever. So pretty amazing. So yeah, but I would almost place a small wager that the Republicans will take it back in 2 months' time, because this will be a rallying cry. You know, it'll be like don't be so petty and not. And you might love Palin, but make sure your second vote is big baggage, or you might love baggage, make sure your second vote is Palin, and you know, to try and figure it out. But when I saw that, I tweeted out that I was very proud of the people of Alaska, because you know, they did the right thing.
By the same token, it should be a rallying cry for the Democrats as well, because by God, if they keep it, it's a huge feather in their cap.
Yep.
And like we've both been saying, that's you know, a good sign for things to come. If they can take out Alaska, then why not Texas?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, with Beto down there in Texas, got pretty close a couple of times to getting in, and I think he's probably setting up for a run at president. Is Mr. Beto? I think that's what he's probably about. But yeah, look, it's going to be really interesting. They're saying that Congress is like a 75-25 chance to the Republicans. When it's that big of a chance, you kind of think that's pretty much gone. I mean, there is still a 25% chance. And what I often say, I like playing poker. And if you watch poker online, what they do with when they're playing poker on the telly is they give the hands and they give the percentage chances that hand's going to win. Sometimes the hands that have a less than 1% chance still win, because that's what percentages are, you know, that those who are lesser still win 25% of the time. I don't think that means that the Democrats will win Congress, but it seems more and more likely that they will take the Senate. And, you know, this is just going to add fuel to the fire. And the Republicans have brought it on themselves. We talked the other night about Roe versus Wade. What's happening at the moment is there are a lot of Republican lawmakers, politicians, who are scrubbing their websites of all the pro-life stuff. Like, whereas a year ago, they were all very much, partial birth, abortion, you know, heartbeat policies, you know, it's a baby. That now they're far more centrist in their views on their websites. If you want to look it up, just Google, Google Republican scrubs website pro-life, and you'll see all the examples of Republicans doing that. So yeah, they've handed themselves a poison chalice. It's literally the definition of hoisted by one's own petard. And I think that's probably the reason the Senate's going to go to the Democrats. The House, the Congress is going to go to Republicans unless something miraculous happens. But yeah, this will do nothing but, as you say as well, Chewy, maybe fire up the base of the Democrats as well, saying, "See, if we can win one that hasn't been won in 50 years, who's stopping us?"
Yeah. A little bit of hope.
Yeah, maybe a little bit of hope never killed anyone.
I just want the toxic influence that American politics has just spewed out over the rest of the world. You know, like you know, you lost a vote or you lost the election, then it must be election fraud is the default go-to.
Yeah, it's sad, isn't it? Because, and I mean, this is why. But this is why I constantly say, and have been saying for a very, very, very long time, when America calls themselves the greatest democracy on earth, I'm like, what's your metric for that? Come on, you guys lose an election and you cry foul. In fact, I almost kind of think I would disagree with them doing this, but part of me kind of goes, if any Democrats lose, they should do the same thing. I actually don't think they should, but if what happens is the Democrats never cry foul and the Republicans always do, then that narrative will stay the same, that if the Democrats win, then it's obviously through fraud. So I'm not entirely sure how to handle that, but it's pretty annoying. It's pretty difficult to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely.
What is is it? I don't even know how to say that. How do you say that name?
Burgdug.
Burgdug, great name, good looking man. They do rank choice voting in Alaska. We need that here in New Zealand, though I am quite biased as I typically vote for small parties. Shout out to TOP, yeah. You used to like TOPA until they banned you because of what you said to Mr. Plunkett. Is that right?
Look, I didn't mind Top. I thought they had some good ideas. Yeah, I mean they're still floating around, but without Gareth Morgan's money. I think they're pushing shit uphill personally.
Yeah. Look, I just don't like to waste my vote, Chewy. For people who don't, let me say this for people who don't know. In fact, I shouldn't say this too publicly, because if I say this publicly, maybe people won't vote for Brian Tamaki's party. So this is what happens. Yeah. Why sometimes you see that a party like, I think you could probably look it up for me, Chewy, if you like. But a party last time who got 48% of the vote, whatever Labour ended up getting, can have like 51 or 52% of the seats. Because what happens is it ends up being 48% of all the votes of political parties that are over 5%. So therefore, if 6% of the vote goes to parties that don't make 5%, then it's actually 48% out of 94. And that's how they get the 51% of the votes. So basically what they do, it's the equivalent of taking all of those votes. Have you looked it up? What did Labour end up getting? What percentage of the vote does it say? Because they've got like a 5-seat majority, remember? Maybe they've got like 50.1, but they've got like a 5-seat majority. They've got 65 seats, I think. Maybe 4 seats with Mr. Sharma. So it's the equivalent of all those political parties who don't make it. So if you vote for Brian Tamaki, or you vote for Top, or you vote for Conservatives, or you vote for whatever, and you don't make it, it's the equivalent of all those votes then get split up and allocated evenly to the parties who do make it. So in other words, a vote for a party that doesn't make it could actually literally go to a party that you don't want in. That's what the definition of a waste of a vote is. But that's the way you work it out. The way you work it out is you do the percentage of all the votes of parties that are over 5%. So what do they get? 50. Oh, they got 50.
Yeah.
So, but they got 50, but they've got, I think, 65 MPs, haven't they?
Yeah, I think it has.
Yeah, on the far right. So 65 MPs obviously out of 120 is far more. So that's actually 50 out of, they got 50%, but it's going to be 50% of whatever the number of votes that were over 5%. So it might be actually out of like 96%, which is how they get those extra seats. So that's why people say it's a waste of a vote, because so if Labour had got 48%, that still would have been a majority government, because it would have been 48 out of whatever the amount was, 96, 97, whatever it was, to give them that mark.
Yeah, it's interesting to point out here. Vision New Zealand. That's Brian Tamaki again, wasn't it?
Yeah, Hannah Tamaki, but that group.
Oh yeah. So I mean, this new party that they're forming. Forget about our last result. It's a new party. I'd be interested to see if they get any more than that. And
just read it out because we've got audio listeners and I can't actually see it. It's too small. How much?
Vision New Zealand got 4,236 votes, or 0.1% of the vote.
Yeah.
So yeah, below the margin of error.
You'll probably find that members of Destiny Church are about 4,235, and 5 of them are rebels, something like that.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll stick a pin in that one and revisit it.
So if you have a look at bring that back up again. If you have a look at the parties Oh, that's right. So anyway, everyone's clear on what I'm saying. It's if Labor gets 50% of the vote, it's not 50% of 100. It ends up being 50% of the 96% of the votes that count, which is why they've got more than 50% of the seats. So that's how it works. All right. Speaking of elections, maybe we should have a look at. Have you heard of this party, National? They're a new party.
Oh yeah, I might have seen some grassroots rumblings about those guys.
Yeah, all right. Well, let's have a look what happened today. What happened today with the National Party is it's been 10 days that leader Luxon has been getting asked questions about ruling out Brian Tamaki. On some level, I tend to agree with what Mr. Luxon says, because he's like, do I really need to have this conversation? But I guess we are living in a day and age where if you don't say no, the media is going to say you mean yes. So I think that it's an irrelevant question because they won't be there. So on some level, having to answer this question for someone who's not going to be there seems a bit moot. But from an intelligent political perspective, you got to know that if you don't rule out the extremists, people are going to question you as to why you're not ruling out the extremists. So let's have a look at the story and see what transpired today.
Court is now in session.
A fake judge presiding over a mock trial.
On the count of crimes against humanity for inhumane acts, how does the jury find the defendant guilty or not guilty?
Not
that's
enough
binding,
for Christopher
apparently.
Luxon to say in alliance with Brian.
Apparently that's binding, the guilty charge.
There's a game that goes on where you want me to rule out each and every one and move through each and every party in the parliament, and I'm not prepared to do that. I know everyone wants to play the game of who we're ruling in and who we're ruling out. All I'm just saying to you is we have a long way to go to the election.
Telling reporters to
read between the lines.
Christopher Luxon ploughed on. He doubled down. He said he wouldn't rule it out.
Grant Robertson going gangbusters.
Brian Tamaki, in talking about homosexuality, said, I quote, "No other sin in the whole Bible has any connection to earthquakes, floods and volcanic eruptions."
He's just lashing out, and frankly what he's just trying to do is create a distraction. The big news of yesterday was a government that actually made a very rapid turn on a Kiwisave attacks.
Not as rapid though, Luxon's own U-turn on working with Tamaki. That's taken 10 days.
If you want me to rule it out, I'm happy to do that.
It took him a while to do it. I think he was considering it.
Are you pleased to hear that Christopher Luxon's ruled out working with Brian Tamaki?
Very pleased.
Because Brian Tamaki's views are not conducive to
a political culture where all members of the community, including the rainbow community, can participate.
Brian Tamaki today warned Christopher Luxon of the danger of writing him off, declaring his coalition of fringe parties kingmaker. While that may be far-fetched, Luxon's initial refusal to rule out working with Tamaki lends credibility to extreme right views.
Yep.
Politically, it would have been wiser to just rule him out a week ago. Isabel Ewing, News Hub.
Yep.
It was such an easy thing for him to say, no, I'm not going to work with it. Like, how... We keep coming back to this about Luxon being a political amateur, and this is an example of it.
I also don't buy. I mean, even though what I just said beforehand, he's not going to be there, so do you really need to rule him out? However, in saying that, I'm not going to buy. He's kind of saying, you guys all know what I mean, because if someone said to him, "Would you rule out working with the National Front?" He'd go, "Of course." Like, he wouldn't hesitate with that. So you can still ask the question, why did he hesitate with us?
Yeah.
Was it because he thought we better get a lie of the land. Remember, we talked about this quite soon after he wouldn't rule it out. He started in the weekend talking about, I think this was me and George Chewy, he started talking about parents and parenting, and it had that kind of vibe about it of, oh, okay, hang on. If some of these people are raising their voices and they're the kinds of people that normally talk, and I'm putting parentheses around this, family values, because as we all know, it's only particular family values they want to talk about.
Yeah, it's a certain type of family,
yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. But that does often flow through the church. And it was interesting that he pivoted quite hard for that in the weekend just gone. So he either thought we better test the waters here first before I rule them out, and then rule them out, or he was genuine in his idea of like, well, of course we don't have to worry about them. They're not going to be there. But like I said, if it was the National Front, or if it was the, I don't know, legalized cannabis party, I'm sure he'd be like, no, we're not, like there'd be no hesitation there.
Yeah.
So that because in my opinion, there'd be no hesitation there. I still want to ask the question, why was there a hesitation here?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's just such a softball question that anyone with a political brain in their head just would have gone, nah, not working with them. Have you seen them? They're crazy. Job done. Move on.
I mean, Nicola Willis said that in the House yesterday. That's what we were talking about.
Absolutely.
Her as the leader. She was like a lunatic pastor or something. She called him.
Yep.
So she's got her messaging and she went for it. Whereas, I don't know. I mean, like, okay, let's take one half step back and be a bit fair. Thinking about him in the House versus Nicola Willis in the House. Now he was very much, I have my questions here and I'm going to read them out to the Prime Minister. Maybe he is more softly, and maybe he's more, like contemplative before he answers. But I guess you have to be aware, if you're going to be that, the optics of it at times like now aren't going to be good.
Yeah. And I mean, I think there are parallels. I mean, you said it. I certainly thought it as well. That he is from a Pentecostal church, just Destiny. So, I mean, is that more? It's let that narrative get some oxygen. Maybe he didn't rule them out because he agrees with a lot of what they're saying, and he's gone, oh shit, no, I will rule them out, and please don't look into the church that I go to.
Yeah, or at least went to. I mean, I do like to be fair. I don't know if he still goes there now. And remember, I don't know if you know this, True, but I know quite a lot about that church. I know the people who run it, and I've filmed various shows in their building because it's a fucking awesome building. Very cool. So yeah, I don't know. I'm interested. I mean, I'd like to ask him that question. Would you rule out other parties on the spot? And if you would, why didn't you rule out them on the spot? What's the difference there? Was it calculated or was it just not thinking? It could be either of those things. And if it's just not thinking, then that's not smart political optics.
No.
I want to move into the second part of this conversation, and it's more about now, as we said before, we often do sort of deeper dives, or we do debunkings and that kind of stuff, or whatever we call them. Conspiracy theorists are always wrong mostly. This is not that, because I'm not looking to debunk anything. What I'm looking to do is start to investigate something. So you probably saw some footage of him talking, of Mr. Luxon talking, and what he was at a steel mill today. And this is actually the full interview, stand up in front of the press of him at the steel mill, 5.5 minutes. I've pulled a clip out of this because he starts.
What a great freeze frame there, by the way. Just a moment of ecstasy at the.
Hang on, what if shall I do the sound effect for it? Is that the sound effects?
Yeah.
There's never any malice in my freeze frame. That's literally based on what the next word is coming out of someone's mouth. Just so you're clear.
It's just so good.
Can you just see him shuddering as well at that moment, like right then?
Look at that. 201. I remember that one.
Okay, so I wanted to have a look. So this is part of the clip we've just seen showed some of the answers from this conversation, but there's a part of this conversation during the pivot, because see what's happened, right, is National was so stoked when Sharma came out because that took the conversation away from Uffindel. Yeah. Now Labor's stoked that the Brian Tamaki stuff's come out because that's taken the conversation away from the Kiwisave tax debacle. Yeah. And so what, of course, now the opposition are trying to do, and back then the Labour Party were trying to do, was trying to put it back, focus it back on the other people. Stop talking about the stuff that we're doing wrong, or maybe the blues we've made, and let's talk about the other people. So there was a moment in this conversation where he basically pivoted back to talk about how terrible Labor is. I want to play it for you, and then I want to investigate some of his claims. It's not a deep dive. It feels like maybe day one of a cursory look that we will continue to look at over the next 12 to 14 months. So let's have a listen to what Mr. Luxon had to say when he was talking about the Labor government being addicted to spending, and then let's have a look at some of his claims.
Oh, look, let's be honest. I mean, Grant Robertson, I mean, I feel sorry for him, right? I mean, honestly, he dreamt up a Kiwisave tax after having a go at a wealth tax. The guy's addicted to spending. He hasn't delivered any of his budgets within a surplus. He's not likely to do so. So he's just lashing out. And frankly, what he's just trying to do is create a distraction. And so this is the frustration, right? I mean, every week they want to create a distraction and a deflection from the fact that they're performing incredibly poorly. The whole country's going backwards. We have an economy where inflation's continuing to get out of hand. We have a healthcare system falling literally apart before our eyes. We have the worst attendance record with only 46% of our kids going to school regularly in this country. We have a housing crisis that hasn't been solved. And we've got rising levels of crime. So on any dimension, on any outcome, this government is not achieving anything. And so I fully understand every week, there's going to be a story to try and deflect and distract from what they're doing.
All right, there you go, Chewy. I didn't realize you were going to give me quite the same response there. Did you just take a screenshot and tweet it out?
Yes, absolutely.
Look, you start first. Hang on, can we see that? That's Chewy's tweet. I can't do that. I can't find it.
So good.
Right, you start first while I load up my screen of research.
Let's go through that one. Well,
we're gonna.
So, inflation, obviously, famously Labor's fault.
Okay. Okay. Well, if you've got responses to all of these, then let's do it bit by bit. I was going to give you a chance to respond because that's what I've done. I've done a bit of research, and I've actually gone through and I've looked at the list of things that he called out. This is me, like Mr. Luxon now reading my notes. Inflation, a little bit about the economy, healthcare system, school attendance, housing crisis, rising crime, and that's what I've looked at. Yeah. So let's start at the very beginning with inflation. So New Zealand's inflation is 7.3. Okay. Now I went to start to have a look at some of the like-minded countries, and these are some of the countries who have a higher inflation than us right now. South Africa, Germany, Italy, USA, Sweden, Denmark, Ireland, Austria, Iceland, the whole of the EU on average, Belgium, Netherlands, and the UK. I started to have a look down this system, and I haven't even been silly because if you go to the top, like 285% in Zimbabwe. But
why has Jacinda done that to Zimbabwe?
And then I started to go the other way, right? So we're at 7.3, which is here. I started to go the other way. And what I'm looking for are trading partners, OECD members, like-minded countries, similar to our kind of Western culture that are below us. And to be honest, unless you can see any there, Chewy, you feel free to shout them out. I basically got to China and Japan, who are certainly not like-minded when it comes to Western philosophy, but are trading partners, and couldn't really find anybody else through a cursory look who has a lower whatever it's called at the moment, rate. I love the word something. So you've got Japan, you've got the UAE, obviously oil money, you got Hong Kong, so there are countries who are better inflation. That's what I'm looking for. That was the word that jumped out of my head. But really compared to our if we say brethren, we seem to be the lowest in the world. Now, we had this conversation with Michael Whitehouse, and the question I asked Michael Whitehouse was, acknowledging that inflation is a worldwide problem, what would be an amount of inflation that we would be sitting at that you would be happy with? In other words, this is terrible. Like, what would be, actually, we're doing pretty good. And I think he came down to about maybe 1 to 2% lower. So let's call that 5.5%. And as you can see, look, France,
that we'd be up around 8 by now.
Well, be fair. France is on 5.8. That's a comparable country. So we'd be more like France. So there's one there. France, Fiji's on 5.2. Chad, Ivory Coast, Iraq's on 5.4.
So where's Australia?
Yeah, actually, I didn't read them out. Where is Australia? I thought about that as well. I expect them to be better than us because they were.
Austria.
Yeah,
the other Australia.
I expect they are.
Oh, there it is. There it is. Go back up.
Did I go past it?
6.1.
Okay, so they're below us as well. So cool. So look, we're being fair. There are people below us, but comparatively, most people are significantly above us.
Yep.
So this is my thought. Yeah, And my thought is, it's really easy to complain at the moment about how things are going when it looks bad. But should we be complaining about how it's going, or should we be comparing ourselves to the rest of the world? So Chewy, like, I don't know why I always use kind of being too fat analogies. If someone was 30 kgs overweight, right? And they were like, right, it's time to get healthy. It's time to get it in order. This is not okay. My body is not okay. But they were working with a whole bunch of people that were 50 kgs overweight and 100 kgs overweight. Yes, it wouldn't be the best for them, but compared to the work they had to do to the other people, they would be in a much better position. And I wonder if what we're looking at right now, no one's saying inflation is good, no one's saying it's okay, but what I wonder if what we're looking at right now is we're in a situation where we're not that okay, not that happy about it as a country, but actually compared to the rest of the world, we've got quote unquote less weight to lose. So we're in a better position than most places. Now, if we're in a better position than most places, what is National actually saying? That if they had been in charge, we would have been in a better position? You know, so that's, I guess, my question. Michael Woodhouse said maybe 1 to 2% difference. So is it that they're actually complaining that we're not 6%, but we're 7.3? So they're actually only complaining about 1% of inflation? Or is it that we're at 7.3% and they're not acknowledging that compared to most of the Western world, we're much better? I'm just asking the questions.
What would a whole lot of COVID deaths do to our inflationary rate?
Yeah,
because I mean that would be my question. But yeah, it's like he keeps on talking about inflation as if there's no external factors, and that's from the party of business and the economy. He should know better than that. Now, is he lying or is he stupid?
Yeah,
because those are your two pathways when you go down that sort of track.
Or is he ignorant? I mean, the third would be, I guess that's stupid. Yeah. Look, Jay has just asked the exact question that we asked Michael Woodhouse. What should it be? Maybe I should find that clip and maybe tomorrow, whatever, we'll bring it in. What should it be? The other thing they talked about is he talked about inflation and he talked about the economy. The economy is quite a hard thing to actually nail down comparing it to the rest of the world. But I guess, GDP per capita is one way to look at that. And so here's some stats around GDP per capita, and I think this is current. Oh, this is okay. Well, this might be 2017, so maybe we shouldn't look at this because I don't want to put out fake information. But at the moment,
there's been a few things that have happened since then.
Well, but it puts us at about 20th in the world. I know it says 50, but that's just overall GDP. But per capita, it puts us about there. I thought that I looked up quite carefully to actually look up current stuff, as opposed to, maybe we'll leave the GDP out there because I don't want to put out fake information. So unless you've got something else to share about that, we'll move on to the next one, which is healthcare system. Healthcare system in disarray. Now, again, I'm not suggesting that our healthcare system is perfect, and look, I tried to be quite careful to get us quite a good bit of information that was quite close to today, so not finding stuff from 2005. This is from a year ago. New Zealand's number 15 in the 2021 World Index of Healthcare Innovation. It puts us at a pretty good place. I did highlight something I remember. So for the quality of healthcare, New Zealand is ranked 6th in the WIHI dimension for quality. In particular, New Zealand's performance in the element pandemic preparedness and response, that'll be based around when COVID first kicked off, I'm assuming, is 5th in the world, bolstered by the country's strong standing. Similarly, New Zealand's score in the element patient-centered care at 7th strengthened its ranking. The only metric where New Zealand scored below the median was for the element measures of preventable diseases, where we're 21st. So again, I'm not suggesting that we've got a perfect healthcare system, but I think it's always important to at least go, because, if you're a little rugby team and somewhere living rurally in New Zealand, you can have an amazing rugby team. Yeah. But probably if you go play, King's College in Auckland or Auckland Grammar or whatever the Wellington ones are and the Christchurch ones are, you're probably going to get smoked, even if within your local small economy of rugby players, you have a very good team. So some areas can only do so well. No one can do as well as they can. So I like to think about it as, are we doing as well as we can? Are we punching above our weight? Are we doing better than we should be? What are the cards we've been dealt and how are we actually dealing with them? And for healthcare, not suggesting it's perfect, not suggesting it's right, but, it seems most places put us at top 20 in the world for our actual healthcare, and for a country of 5 million people, that doesn't seem terrible to me.
And again, look at what the healthcare system has been dealing with during the global financial crisis. National pillaged their budget. They were on a zero spend at one point, and then Labor's come in and just poured money into it. There's new hospitals, and it's still, as you said, it's not perfect. It's not enough. We're hemorrhaging nurses. Frontline staff don't feel like they get paid enough, and I think they would be right, because they've spent 2 years on the front line of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And All National seems to want to say as well, maybe we should let a couple of nurses that didn't want to get the vaccine back.
Well, when Susie Ferguson says directly to Mr. Luxon in one of her interviews, so are you going to pay nurses more? He won't commit to it. So it's like they're currently criticizing the current government for the terrible situation with nurses that are leaving. We all know, Chewie, if the opposition to where you're working right now offered you double the money, how long would you take to hand your notice in?
Oh, probably a good couple of weeks.
Yeah. But you know what I'm saying? It's like,
but that's the thing. These nurses are looking at, like, they can just jump over to Australia tomorrow.
Yeah.
And waltz into whatever department they want to work in a private hospital and make bank. They can head to Europe. They're in demand. Our training is good. And so there just ends up being this merry-go-round of, we train them up and send them overseas, and then we bring in people from overseas to fill the gaps that we should have been filling anyway. So what is it that we're not doing right? And it comes down to, I will do that job and I will do it for money.
Yeah.
And that's not a criticism of our nursing students at all. It's a stressful job. But if someone else is paying our nurses more, why aren't we competing?
Yeah. Well, the answer is we probably can't. And that's what I'm saying. It's like the small rural town with a great rugby team. You're not going to get the top the potential super rugby players in training to come to your school, because it's not how it works. They go to the bigger schools, the Christ College of the world, because that's where not literally the money, but certainly that's where the resources are. And it's no different. Hey, we're gonna keep trucking, because I don't want to be here till midnight. Because the next thing that Luxon talked about was school attendance, and I've been fascinated about this actually, because he cites the number 46%. And I found where the number came from. It came from Term 1 school attendance figures plumb new depths. And the line says here, regular student attendance defined by the Ministry of Education as away for no more than 10% of available half days plumbed new depths in Term 1, with 46.1% of students nationwide meeting the benchmark. So he says 46% all the time. This is actually where the numbers come from. So it's from Term 1 attendance. So therefore the question is, why? And this article actually goes into a bit more of it. So 2 things. Absences due to COVID-19 combined with the early onset of winter illnesses resulted in record high absences for short-term illnesses and medical reasons in Term 1. It goes on to say, this is from the ministry report, we have seen absences due to parental/family concerns that attendance at school is unsafe because of the risk of contracting COVID-19. Regional feedback indicates that, as well as the impacts of students staying home if they are close contacts or unwell. Remember, at that stage, if you were a close contact of someone at school, you had to stay home for 7 days. Yeah, it's changed now. It's only if they live in your house. But at that stage, basically, if you came into contact with COVID, you were forced to stay at home for 7 days. Yeah. There it goes on to say, close or unwell, there may be impacts on parents of COVID fatigue and of attendance seemingly less important. The ministry was asked for comment on Friday, but was unable to provide a response. Let me tell you something. My 2 kids in the first term, we took them out about week 4 or week 5, and they didn't go back until the last week of the term. And why did we do that? Because we went into Orange. There was still a lot of COVID around, and they'd taken away the mask mandate, and we didn't feel it was safe for them. And both of those schools had COVID ripped through them when we had our kids out. So the reason, it would appear to me, is because of COVID, whereas Mr. Luxon is saying Labor, 46%, and they're bad, and that's it. So I actually will say on this time, that's debunked. His accusation of this being a governmental issue I think is debunked. I think we can put debunked on this one, like if it was Mythbusters, the myth is debunked.
Absolutely.
Because that's what it's about.
Bullshit.
Yeah.
It's bullshit. It's just it's not a lie. But like he's putting a reason on it that doesn't exist. It's like he's forgotten about COVID.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, no. He hasn't forgotten about COVID. He's selectively editing his comments, and he's just saying he's using it's the shell game. We talk about the shell game all the time.
Yep.
He's saying it's 46% of kids are away from school regularly. Now, don't look why. Please don't look why, because if you look why, the ministry report will actually cite COVID. And if you think,
and then
why,
I'll segue into the attendance rate, and now I'm talking about RAM rating. Draw your own conclusions. Wake up.
Yeah. On his housing crisis comment, which he made, I'll say one thing: fair. There is a housing crisis, whether it's living, whether it's cost of rent, whether it's cost of mortgages. But what I will also say is neither Labor nor National have a solution to that. So should National win the next election, Labor will be saying, well, what are you going to do about the housing crisis? There's been a housing crisis on some level, not as extreme as it is right now, but on some level in New Zealand since the 1990s. And it's every opposition, Labor and National and ACT and New Zealand First and the Greens, when they're out of power, talk about it to the incumbents. So there is a housing crisis. It's fair. I've got no criticism if I'm using that, but I think the addendum is if you are the next Prime Minister, you will also have a housing crisis that's been around since the 1990s. So there's not much more to say about that.
And what's the timeline to fix it?
Yeah, you know? yeah. And finally, he brought up crime. Rising crime was his last thing that he brought up.
I love this one. I love it.
I found a good bit of research that Spinoff did. What kinds of crimes are being committed? And if you actually have a look, this is obviously pandemic here. Got that? Because obviously there was no burglars being done. So if we go back pre-pandemic, right? So let's say here, theft and relatable offences were 14,065. The latest report says there's 16,000. So he's right. They've gone up, but they've gone up from 14,000 to 16,000. If you go to unlawful entry, it's got 6,800, and then the last year was 5,600. So that's actually gone down. If you go to acts of intended to cause injury, 2,352 back pre-pandemic, 2,348. So it's stagnant. So, it's not that I'm not suggesting that there aren't areas where it has gone up, but it would be really interesting to hear more about what he's saying. And then also relate it to things like one of the reasons crime rates go up at any stage in any country of the world is, for example, people lacking resources and people lacking money. Now, in saying that, without prejudging them, if National gets in next time around, do you think that will help, let's say, people on social welfare, on the benefit, become more financially secure, or harm them based on their history? If it helps them,
jail.
If it helps them, well, there you go. They'll have a free roof over their head then. If it helps them financially, then yeah, you might see an impact. If it harms them, you may well see crime rates going up more significantly than what they're complaining about now.
Here's what I think he's talking about, right?
Sure.
In the news, there has been quite a lot about RAM rates. And I read an article, I think it was on RNZ, that was saying, yeah, there is a spike in youth crime. And a lot of it is really visible RAM rating activity in Auckland. Nationwide, youth crime has gone down. So, yeah, we're just focusing on what's on the news. And, people see that and they see these terms, and then they'll point at something in their local area and go, oh, no, it's happening here. The kids in the baggy jeans and the hoodies stealing chocolate bars from the dairy. And that's now spun out as a nationwide crime wave that just isn't there. It's that confirmation bias. So yeah, there is a RAM rating problem in Auckland, absolutely, but it's not a nationwide youth crime rate because they're not going to school.
Yeah, no, and that's true. It's the what is it? Correlation is not causation. Causation is not correlation. Which way it goes? Yep. I always forget which way that is. And look, Ash has just made a really good point about the attendance, actually, because as I read that, I read that thing about 10 half days a term. That's a week. So in other words, every kid that was stood down because they were a close contact, right? Every kid, because that's 7 days, and that should be at least 5 school days and a weekend. There's 7 days. Are going to tick that box. So how many kids were stood down in that first term because they were close contacts from COVID, whether they were sick or not, and had to go home and were marked absent? Because Ash is right. 10 half days is obviously 5 days, which is only 1 week.
Yep. And how many days of school learning were lost because teachers got sick because there wasn't a mask mandate?
Yeah, completely. Completely.
So, there's stuff to criticize there, and there's stuff that the education department absolutely could have done better. But again, Luxon's missing that. He's missing that point, which could be a legitimate criticism.
Yeah.
And it's coming back to parents aren't sending their kids to school and they're all off stealing cars and ram raiding dairies for cigarettes.
You know what I love? I love it when people are doing the research for us. So Rose is right now, she's obviously done the looking up. I don't know. What do I assume Ro is a female? Ro, like Rowena? I could be wrong. Ro could be Richard Osborne. Who knows?
If you're not a woman, you are now.
Yeah.
Sorry,
she's delightful as Ro. We love her. Says that our per capita is 28th. But even 28th there's, what is it, 210 countries in the world, or is that bones in the body? Yep. I always forget. Something like that. The 28th for a little pissant country like us, that's pretty good. But also Ro has talked about on RNZ this morning, school attendance is around 75%. So that 46% from the first term where people had to stand down, isn't it? According to Ro, yeah. I can't endorse it because I haven't heard it. I got the first name right. Oh, nice, Ro. Nice to meet you. Is that's now 25%. So why isn't he saying, if those are the latest numbers, we should look that up. Ro, why don't you look that up for us and send us a link? We're now 25%. So why is he still saying 46%? Because that's the number that suits the narrative to say bad labor, bad government.
Yeah.
Hey, I want to finish up with a bit of fun because this is fucking awesome.
Oh, so do I. You go first.
Oh, do you want to? Is it okay?
No, you go first. I want to say my horrible thing right at the end.
Well, mine's not horrible. You seem to be kind of about to say that you're saying something.
No, it's fun. It's fun horrible.
This is a couple of days old, and many of you will have heard a little bit around this. The hashtag that was going around Twitter, Thisyou. But what you may not have heard is how this has happened and who is really behind it. And you've got the White House getting in on some trolling and clapbacks, and it's pretty flippin' awesome. Let's have a listen.
When President Biden announced he was canceling a bunch of student loan debt for millions of Americans this week, Republicans like Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia were there to whine about it.
It's completely unfair, and taxpayers all over the country, taxpayers that never took out a student loan, taxpayers that pay their bills and maybe even never went to college or just hardworking people, they shouldn't have to pay off the great big student loan debt for some college student that piled up massive debt.
Now, first of all, I just want to be clear here because I've seen this talking point a lot. No one is paying it off. No one's taxes are going up. Marjorie Taylor Greene doesn't have to pay for it. It's deficit finance, like a lot of stuff we've done. So that's just nonsense. But that critique is also, of course, particularly rich coming from a woman who had her own government loans forgiven. Something that was pointed out by lots of people on social media, including, kind of surprisingly, the official White House Twitter account, which pulled a Thisyou, responding to that video of Greene saying, quote, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene had $183,504 in PPP loans.
From the White House. From the White House. In fact, look, we're not going to look at these because guess what? Guess what, chicken butt? Let's go into the White House feed and see what was done.
Oh, I love it.
So this is the White House, official White House Twitter. And you can see that they put some clips up.
But for our government just to say, okay, well, your debt is completely forgiven. Obviously, they have an agenda for that. They need votes in November. So the timing is up.
Well, you know what? She's actually got a point there. But that's what any political party does is they offer jewels out and say, vote us back in. I mean, what she's saying is accurate, and everybody does it.
Pure coincidence there as well. But it's completely unfair. And taxpayers all over the country, taxpayers that never took out a student loan, taxpayers that pay their bills and maybe even never went to.
Because in the Republicans' wise, when you're talking about the victim, they're always perfect people. Everybody who is a taxpayer on her are all paying their bills and they're all perfect people. Anyway, we won't play the rest of her nasally annoying voice. But for people who are listening, there is a tweet above it that says Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene had $183,504 in PPP, which is Paycheck Protection Program loans forgiven. What did we call it here in New Zealand when the government gave companies money to help pay their
wage subsidy? So
that's the wage subsidy. So she had nearly 185 grand forgiven. You want to talk about that before I go on to some other
Yeah,
stuff?
so I just want to say this this ham with a blonde wig on. The other point that I find interesting, because I saw it mirrored in some of the comments from other people in her party, that they talk about hardworking Americans that maybe didn't go to college. You know, I guess she's saying the tradies, especially. You know, the plumbers and the carpenters and good, honest, hearty, hardworking folk. You know, so everyone, the slight there is everyone that went to college isn't hardworking, which I'm sure the doctors that have been studying for 8 years and have like $1 million loans must be stoked to hear about.
The doctors who help those tradies out when they put a nail through their foot.
Oh,
those doctors.
100%, 100%. And, you know, that's them taking a swing at the educated elite, which is very much in her wheelhouse. The other aspect of that is it completely ignores how broken the student loan system is in the States.
Yeah.
You can pay off an enormous amount of money and then it doesn't even cover the interest on it. And that's just other companies clipping the ticket like so much in America. Someone is standing there clipping the ticket on everything, and you can pay down and you never even touch the principal for years and years and years. So yeah, in my opinion, the $10,000 is not much at all in the scheme of things. They should have just wiped everybody's loans and wiped out those companies, and we fucked this up. Let's start again.
So we'll continue on with a few more of these clips because there's another one that wasn't shown. This is Republican Vern Buchanan. A bit of noise from him.
A lot of families in our region, they've been talking about forgiveness of loans for the last 4 or 5 months, are very, very upset. Many of them work 2 jobs to be able to put their kids through college, and then to think that a lot of these loans are going to be forgiven is wrong. And
so the tweet that he put out says, as a blue-collar kid who worked his way through college, I know firsthand the sacrifice people make to receive an education.
How much was his tuition when he did that?
But wait for this. Biden's reckless unilateral student loan giveaway is unfair to the 87% of Americans without student loan debt and who's paid. Now, the White House clapped back by saying Congressman Vern Buchanan had over, you ready for this, people who are only listening to the audio? $2.3 million in PPP loans forgiven. So
free money.
Free money, $2.3 million. And there's a bunch of other ones. There's an example there of a Republican complaining about it. Mullen, and he or she had over $1.4 million in PPP loans. Representative Kevin Hearn talked about it, had $1 million in loans forgiven. Mike Kelly had $1 million in loans forgiven. Matt Gaetz, everybody's favorite. Everyone knows that in a $60 billion plus European landlord, it's always the last $3 billion that kicks in the door, says Representative Matt Gaetz. And the White House clapped back. Congressman Matt Gaetz had $482,321 in PPP loans forgiven. So, and I like this first comment from someone going in there. And the Twitter user is called I Smoked the Top Secret SCI Documents. That's his Twitter handle. He said, today is the day that Joe Biden officially becomes the second black president of the United States because only my people would do some shit as gangster as this. So that was that was his response. Now, sorry, you go. Yep.
I was going to say, I actually saw a little bit of this here when I think it was the groundswell protest and that, and people were going, all about Jacinda and that, and people are like, you're talking about communism, but is this your company that got a massive wage subsidy?
Yeah.
That's you know what that is? That's the socialism that you hate.
Yeah. So the White House on this whole sort of idea said this: we've never hesitated to call out hypocrisy, and we're not going to stop now. A White House spokeswoman, Alexandria Lamana, said when she was asked about the tweets on Friday, it's important to make clear that many of the same people calling student loan debt relief, which will help the middle class and working families by giving them more breathing room, a bailout for the wealthy had no issue with loan bailouts that benefited their own companies and no issue with giving big tax cuts to corporations and the wealthy. Here's the exciting thing, right? The reason this is happening is the White House has a new head of social media.
Please tell me they got the person that ran Wendy's Twitter account.
No, you mean in Canada where they went with the grey hair? Is that what you're talking about?
No, just I remember the official Wendy's Twitter account being absolutely savage a couple of years ago. So hopefully they hired that person.
Well, let's go into savage. Her name is Megan Coyne, right? And she is now basically in charge of of Twitter, and they've brought her on board from New Jersey. She ran the New Jersey Twitter account, and she turned it into somewhat of a meme-making absolute freakish place. So for those of you watching, if you're listening, you're not going to see it, but here is a picture for the bagel capital of the world, National Bagel Day, from the New Jersey. This is one of hers, and it's the shape of New Jersey covered in bagels. Yeah, they get better. They wanted to take on Delaware, so they put out a tweet that said might mess around, and this is the person who's got their hands up for fighting, Punk Delaware. And this is what she was able to do. Is your child texting about New Jersey? TBH means taking bagels home. DTF means disco those fries. WQH means want Taylor ham. WPR want pork roll. And they just went in and made such a big, massive joke about it. They did things like what responded to other people's texts. What do you call people who live in Jersey? Jerseyan, Jersey-ish, Jersey-y? I need to know. The response from the official New Jersey Twitter account was savages. And the last one and the best one, you ready for this, Joey? So this is the person who's now in charge of the Whitehouse Twitter account and who's running their social media. You ready? Have a look at this one. The question sent in, the question sent into New Jersey was, who let New Jersey have a Twitter? The response from, her name is Megan, wasn't it? Yeah. Your mom.
That's some queen shit there.
So that's awesome. That's the person who is now running the Whitehouse Twitter feed. And that's the reason this clapback happened last week. And all I can say is I'm very much looking forward to seeing. I wasn't following the White House. I am now. Right.
So it's done it now.
It's done its job, and she is the reason that this has happened. And you can see she has a history of it. Who let New Jersey have a Twitter? The response from her when she was in charge of the New Jersey governor's Twitter feed: your mom. So that's who's doing it, and that's what's behind it. And they started it, and then that turned into Thisyou. So that actually started somewhat of a ground movement behind then all the activists and Twitter artsy out there looking up their local representatives who were complaining, and then that fed a whole bunch of citizens pointing out the hypocrisy of the Republicans in that moment. It was beautiful to behold. It was wonderful to watch, and I wanted not only to remind you of it if you knew about it, but tell you about it if you didn't, and explain who's behind it. And suggest that maybe we should all go follow the White House for some good clapbacks over the next few months.
Awesome. So my horrible thing that I want to leave everyone with tonight is, your teeth.
I do know my teeth. They're in my mouth.
Yep. So imagine if your teeth were soft and they'd only get hard if they were excited about food.
Imagine your teeth were soft. They only got hard if you're excited about food. Okay.
You got a mouthful of mushy teeth. It's just a thought I had the other day, and it's stayed with me, and so I wanted to share. The more you think about it, the worse it gets.
Yeah, I'm sort of thinking about teeth in my head being mushy.
Just sloshing around.
Mind you, I'm getting to that age where the teeth aren't doing as well as they once were. So maybe that is a bit of a reality for me.
All right, so there we go. That's my shower thought of the night.
Rose also done a bit more research. She says actually, and we pass this on with a grain of salt, not to disrespect Rose, but to actually go, I haven't seen these numbers, but Rose suggests that the attendance now is at 82.5%. Isn't it funny how, like, in term one, when it was 46%, that was also times when the time in the calendar where restrictions around COVID were a lot harsher. Isn't that weird? How, like, if you were at school with someone and one of your friends got COVID when you were at school, you were actually stood down for 7 days. Isn't that weird how the numbers were down then? And now that that's not in place, the numbers are up. I wonder, but causation is not correlation, or correlation is not causation. So it's probably got nothing to do with it. Probably. I don't know.
Yeah. Who knows? We need to get Luxon on the show.
Oh, good luck. I'm still blocked from their Facebook page, man. I don't know what I've done to them, but they don't like me on their Facebook page. I've never spoken on their Facebook page. I got blocked without ever saying anything on their Facebook page. Blocked. Done.
Well, Simeon Brown hasn't banned me yet, and neither has Chris Bishop. So it's going well.
I'm not blocked by the New Zealand National Party Twitter account or Christopher Luxon. But then again, what have we ever done that's been wrong?
Well, I mean, every tweet that I do to Simon Bishop, I start Bish, please.
Well, I'm not talking about you because you get a new Twitter account every 6 weeks after getting banned.
and with Simeon, I'm always asking when his parents are coming to pick him up. But apart from that, it's just low level Twitter bullying. It's fine.
Low level Twitter bullying sounds very progressive to me.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, guys, I think we're done. I think our podcasts worked last night, by the way. Chewy, remember I was all concerned about the podcast not working?
Oh yes, yep.
I'm pretty sure I woke up this morning. Yep, is Nicola Willis the leader? Looking at my feed on Apple Podcast now. I keep wanting to call it iTunes. So that all worked. Oh, here we go. Is Simeon Brown old enough to have a Twitter account?
I assume he's on a child's account that his mum signed him in.
That's what you need.
No,
yeah, you do.
No,
I'll do one.
Too high an opinion of me to see my Twitter.
No, I think that you need to come under me to make sure we keep you in check, so you don't get banned again from Twitter. Maybe that's it. Maybe there's some kind of parental control we can put on your Twitter, and I can be in charge.
Maybe I just need to get ahead of this by creating more backup accounts.
There you go, and start building up your group of people following you, whatever they're called.
Yep, absolutely.
Your Twitterverse. All right, team. Hey, thanks for joining us tonight. It's been a pleasure. Always good to be with you. We're back again tomorrow night from 10 p.m. Still looking for Chantal Baker. Chantal, if you're out there, you said you wanted to come on. I've said, tell us when. Haven't heard back from you. Friday nights would have been a good time, but we'll see how that pans out. All the best, everybody. And thanks for joining us, guys. Appreciate your time. We'll see you tomorrow night from 10 o'clock for another edition of the biggest, hairiest nads in the world. Hooroo.